Hello, everyone, and welcome to Reading Between the Lines.
Yeah.
I'm Miss Jablonski, and this is.
Amanda, Mrs. and Phillips.
We can edit that out. All right. So we're looking at the paper Menagerie today, and we're going to be taking a look at it through a couple of different critical lenses. Why do we use critical lenses, Miss Phillips?
Well, because it helps us be able to look at a text through, different glasses.
hmm we read a text and we can think of a theme, but there's lots of different themes that we can think of if we really focus on a specific type of thinking.
Exactly.
And so I chose to do the social class lens because I think there's a lot in here in this story about capitalism and about there's a lot of references to money and merchants and things like that. And so I thought it'd be interesting to take a look and see how the characters develop and change based on their social class situations.
And that is completely different from what I looked at. I looked at the archetypal lens, which is more focused on patterns and this idea of universal patterns that show up, and that was not like that. It's almost like you're talking about a totally different story to me when you talk about it that way.
Well, and what the with the power of lenses.
Yeah,
Well, look at that.
as
Um,
long as they're not glasses.
what? What are you even talking about?
Yesterday when I was trying to say it like clear as mud.
Concrete glasses instead of clear as mud? I mean, it kinda works. I don't really get it. I don't know why it's so funny, but
I have real bad puns. Well,
was that supposed to be a pun?
not puns, but play on words.
Idioms?
Sure.
Okay.
Edit that out.
No, that's stinging. Speaking of idioms, not really, but, I'm gonna talk about, the story. Okay, so the impetus of this story here is that basically the mom has been purchased, and I think that's already at the start of the story talking about social class, and I think it's really interesting. He says, um back when he was a teen, his thought process was, "What kind of woman puts herself into a catalog so that she can be bought?" And I think that's an important thing to note because he doesn't understand his mom in a lot of ways in this story, but this is a spot where we can see how he doesn't understand his mom's sort of social class upbringing. Later on in the story, obviously through the letter, we find out that the mom had basically no choice. It was this or be abused for her entire life. And so just him not understanding that, I think, is very indicative of what people in, our American society don't understand about people around the world or even people in their own country who are a different social class than they are.
Yeah.
Neat.
So like when you specifically, that reminds me of when you talked about um, you know, the mom and her being bought and sold, and that was kind of like the first thing that stuck out, and how she didn't have a lot of options. It connected to that was one of the first things I picked out, because in the archetypal lens it's more focused on those patterns, and there's so many patterns, so I tried to just limit it down to like the biggest patterns. So I focused it more on the character archetypes and then the symbolic archetypes. And in the character archetype, even though the mom doesn't actually like say a lot and everything we see about her is through her son's eyes, you can definitely see her as that caregiver archetype, and she is very vulnerable to exploitation. And so it's interesting that, that's something you picked out about her from the first thing you saw in her life, and it's also something I picked out from, seeing her character throughout the whole time.
Well, speaking of archetypes, I think this is interesting. It's not something that I did a ton of digging into, but I don't know if you had anything to say about the dad, because the dad is such a non-character to me. His whole purpose is to buy things. It seems like there's the part in the middle where he meets with his classmate and breaks the Obi-Wan Kenobi toy. I think that's a great example of the difference between social class as well. Our main characters' toys, or what if you want to call them that. Are handmade, home crafted, and there's so much magic and life in them. They do so much. They're so, they're made with love. And then we get this contrast with this Obi-Wan Kenobi toy, which can represent sort of the capitalist society. And it just moves. It has articulating joints, but that's basically it. And yet, the value that this classmate puts on the toy is so much more than what that same classmate puts on our main characters' animals, uh, because it's a representation of status.
And I looked at that as a representation of love and a representation. I mean, I think you could see it like from the outside looking in as a representation of culture because origami is, clearly very tied to for his mother, tied to her history and her background. But I think specifically for him, it's very just tied to her and her love for him. The animals come about in a time where he is struggling or a time where he is sad. And I think that even as he's looking at the toy that his friend brings out, he's kind of unsure why this toy is so cool because he doesn't see it as representing really anything. It's just it's completely disconnected from this kid's life. It's just a thing that he has. And the origami isn't just a thing he has, it's something that has a life of its own. So I looked at a lot with the symbol of the origami specifically.
We have time for, maybe one more thing. Did you have something else that you wanted to say about your lens?
I think I tried to do a little bit with like situational archetypes and looking at patterns in that way. And his mom, his mom's death could be seen as like that tragedy element. And then, when he reads the letter at the end and there isn't necessarily like, like a marriage or something positive that happens, it falls into that tragedy archetype in terms of like the plot or the situation. But no, really the even though the story was told in first person or
Yeah.
not in, it was well, it's
Yeah.
not, is it first person?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is first person. Even though it's told through his eyes, I really didn't focus on him as a character as much when it came to like the archetypes. I was just so drawn to the mother because she was such a she took up so much space in his head.
And I think if you did look at him in what kind of archetypes he fits, you'd have to look at, him as several different characters because he's a different person telling this story as opposed to, when he is the character in the story. Because he even talks about like, oh, I was just such a dumb teenager back then and
Yeah.
things like that. So he's grown and changed, and I think we can see that in the story as well. Well, which of these lenses do you think did the best job in?
The theme?
Yeah.
Like as far as the theme? I I think that there's interesting points that you make when it talks about like the whole idea of like the social class lens and like capitalism, but everything that you talk about seems to come back to, especially like with the toys, it's this like symbolic idea. So I think that the archetypal lens has so many connections to so many patterns and ideas throughout time that you can't look at the social lens without being able to look at the archetypal lens.
I think that's probably true. I also think it would be really interesting to take a look at this through the lens of the cultural critic, because I mean, the social class, obviously, I think it does play a huge part in all of this, but the culture is really the thing. You see a lot of like him being called slurs and things like that. So I wonder if that might be another strong one to do. But yeah, the archetypal lens does kind of lend itself more to the broad, like fits everywhere kind of
Yeah.
interpretation.
Yeah, so I really like that ones in terms of I think that there's there's a lot of pieces to pull from the story with it, and I think that it just has so many really good connections to the theme and being able to bring that theme out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Well, thank you for listening to Reading Between the Lines.
Next week, Animal Farm.
Animal Farm again?
Yeah.
Okay. Goodbye.